Welcome to the Retirement Spy, where we are here to help you with planning for your retirement and enjoying that best retirement in your golden years. We're actually joined today by a genius in financial planning that are helping many of my friends prepare for retirement with financial acumen that he and his firm have. We're joined by Andy Berg today, who is the founder of Homrich Berg here in Atlanta. Homrich Berg is one of the top 10 registered investment advisors that are fee only in the country and one of the top 50 registered investment advisors in the entire nation with over $25 billion worth of assets under management. At least that's what's on your website, Andy. If I'm off on that, please jump in. But welcome
That's
to my
accurate.
friend Andy. Yeah, welcome to my friend Andy Berg.
Thank you, Duncan. I'm happy to be here with you today, and I love this topic, and I'm happy to allow my perspective, and I'm interested in your other podcasts because I'll learn something from that too.
So tell us and our listeners more in particular, indulge us how you got started in the wealth management business. Homrich
Sure.
Berg's over 35 years. Tell me what the origins of it and tell me about the origins to the success today.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. It can be a very long story, but as you mentioned, it was a long time ago, 35 plus years ago. Our firm, as you mentioned, is called Homrich Berg. And David Homrich and I were both CPAs out of college. Both had the intention of not remaining CPAs, but getting a good foundation, a good background for business and work. Anyway, in my search to figure out what was next after I completed 3+ years at KPMG in the tax group, I met David. He was several years ahead of me and already out of Price Waterhouse. We hit it off, and we both had an interest in what we called financial planning, now is better known as wealth management. He was already doing it. I ended up joining him in a small firm here in Atlanta that, in addition to doing financial planning, did investment banking and a few other things. But we were the financial planning group of this firm. We ended up staying there a couple years, and then believing that we had an idea and I guess some ability to hang out a shingle on our own. And so we put together a business plan, presented it actually to my father, because as you can imagine, as a 29-year-old, and David was 35 at the time, we didn't have any money, and my dad had just retired. So we convinced him to loan us $100,000, which was a lot of money for him and certainly a lot of money for us. But we were off and running, and our idea simply was, back in 1989, there was an absence of what we call objective financial planning. You referred to it, and as do we, as fee only. Back then, it was all sales, people generating commissions by selling stocks, mutual funds, life insurance, what have you, and earning a lot of money. But our idea was to always be on the same side of the table as the client. And whether we had the right answer or the wrong answer, they knew that their best interest was at heart. And the other idea, which was different than most back then, was combining financial planning and asset management. And we strongly believe, as we do today, that you can't really do one without the other. You have to come up with some type of a financial plan based on all of the objective and subjective issues that a client has to develop a proper investment plan. And that really was the crux of how we started, and is still completely our mantra today. We have not changed that one bit. I suppose we've become more sophisticated because we've now have over 300 people, and back then we were 4. But that's how we got started. We were both CPAs. We kind of formed the firm and ran the firm much like a small accounting or law firm at the time, where we hired young people and hopefully they would excel and advance and one day have the opportunity to be an owner and buy into the business as an equity owner. And we now have about 50 of those type of people.
Congratulations on all that success. I love to hear those stories. I love to have friends of mine who are experiencing so much success and just kind of learn from the things that we do over the time. Hey, question. You're the perfect audience. You're the perfect person to talk to our audience. The thesis that we're working with the Retirement Spy is we have people who have tremendous amount of assets, wealth, and they're not retiring. And it's not because they can't financially. I really believe it's because they don't know what to do next. And I hear the stories of, I love my job and I like everything associated with my job. I'll never retire. And I think the answer is, because I've been up till 2 o'clock in the morning smoking cigars and playing poker with these people, is they don't know what to do.
Right.
because they may not like I know they don't like their job, but they like their title. They like their power. They like the compensation given for the role that they have. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But there's so much that can be done if you've kind of embraced this concept called retirement. You have clients from $1 million in assets to over $1 billion in assets. Beyond the money, what challenges have you witnessed from your clients relative to the contemplation of
Yeah.
retirement?
I suppose you're right. I am a good person to ask about this. The answer, of course, as you might expect, is quite varied. And there are folks that we've had that have retired early and have absolutely no regrets and their days are full. I've had other clients that, kind of like you mentioned, are afraid to pull the trigger. And then a few clients that have retired and went back to work in some form or fashion. And not because they necessarily needed the money, just because they wanted a challenge or something that they deemed more fulfilling. I would say, though, that most of our clients that do retire do not regret it, and they don't feel like they have extra time where they're sitting around doing nothing. They figure out exactly what they want to do. And I have many of them that say, I say, well, what do you do for your 40 hours? And they can't really, account for it precisely, but they're busy, and I don't think they're fibbing. So, from that perspective, I'd say I think people are overly cautious or overly worried about that uncertainty. And, obviously there's lots of things to occupy people's time. And, at some point, especially unless you just really, really love what you do, if you have the means to retire, I'd encourage people to give it a shot. And I haven't done it yet.
Yeah,
I'm
of
slowing
course not.
down, but I haven't done it yet. But I am not worried about how I spend my time.
I think you have to be purposeful if we've been taught all of our life to go to school to get a degree so that you can then have a job, so that job can become a career. And the career becomes a place where you load enough money so that you can retire. No one ever gave us a book to say, okay, what do you do after that? There's never been a college that says, okay, here's what you're going to do after 65. So it's interesting. I had someone tell me that it's all about significance. And so when you're working 40 hours a week, being productive and whatever that is in your career, you're being significant in some way. You're leading a company, you're making money, you're making widgets, whatever it may be. And I'm not sure people always love their careers, but they kind of love the roles that they take and the compensation they get for that. What kind of struggles do you see with your clients as they retire? Is it you're asserting this, not necessarily filling a void or finding something to do, it's something else?
Yeah. I think that also, the significance part, I think that's real. I also think it's overrated, kind of like filling your time. Those people, there are lots of people that I know that have retired that aren't worried about the significance thing. Personally, I am, and I know certain clients that are. And I think the best way to do that is to find something different besides your job that's purposeful. I'm involved with about 5 different nonprofits, some which take very little time, one of which takes a fair amount of time. And I find significance from that. So one of the things I look forward to is spending more time on those boards and being more significant within those organizations that I am now, because I don't really have the time to devote to it. So if that is something that's important to listeners, I would very, very highly recommend that you get involved somewhere where you feel like you're going to make a difference, at a school, at a hospital, wherever it might be. And I think you'll find that rewarding.
I think you're spot on. I think so many people I talk to are looking for that one thing to replace their 140-hour week. And it's not that. It's several things. It's nonprofit boards. It's various groups that you're associated with that you feel important or you feel invested in. Our audience are not the people that say, hey, when we retire, I'm going to play golf 7 days a week. That's not this audience. That's not who we're talking to here. They're really trying to answer the question, how do we plan for that 40 hours? And significance is a big part of that. So if you want to dive in personally, you've moved from CEO now to chairman of the board. I know your life is busy. What are some of the things that are new to you that you're finding time to do that are important?
Yeah.
You mentioned the
I
nonprofit.
can't say that it's funny. I'm definitely not working as many hours. I have a hard time figuring out what I'm doing sometimes with the extra time. But I mean, I am enjoying some of the activities that I have enjoyed over the years, namely travel, golf. And then the other thing that is so important, and you and I know this because we work out together a couple times a week, and that's fitness. We're going to live a much longer and, more importantly, vigorous life if we take care of ourselves. And I'm finding that is of increased importance. Let's it's kind of cool now to take care of yourself. And boy, you see more people outside walking and gyms. And what are they doing to both extend longevity, but also extend the quality of that longevity? And it's real that you can have many more quality years if you take care of yourself. And you got to get a little lucky because sometimes, obviously people have unfortunate health situations that they can't control.
Genetics come into play.
Genetics.
It's interesting. I see a direct correlation between the people who are physically active, trying to take care of themselves directly on the pickleball court. There's a direct line to the hospital for those who really haven't been taking care of themselves. Pickleball with torn Achilles tendons, knees, and everything. And those who are
Yeah.
enjoying pickleball who, okay, this isn't their first rodeo. They've been playing tennis or they've been working out with weights. And so the somehow pickleball is having a ton of injuries, but the correlation I
Yeah.
see is those who are getting injured haven't necessarily been the best in shape, taking care of themselves. So there's a lot to be
Yeah.
said for that.
No, that's for sure.
I'd love to hear from you or your clients some unique pastimes. I mean, we mentioned golf, we mentioned
Yeah.
pickleball. These are kind of the anecdotal things. They're like, yeah, pickleball, golf.
Yeah.
What are you saying that are unique hobbies that some of your clients are picking up that are worthy of our listeners listening to or paying attention
Yeah.
to?
That just going back to the fitness thing for a second, I have seen people that have retired that have completely upped their game, and you now have time potentially to go to yoga, to have a personal trainer. As you mentioned, most of our clients, have some degree of wealth that they can afford some of these luxuries. Others, travel is a big thing, as I mentioned, and some of our wealthier clients, they fly private. Some of them own a plane. Some of them have become pilots. We're talking about a hobby. Some of them like to be outside in their yards, which I have no interest in doing, but lots of people do. And so the hobbies, interestingly, range from things that are very inexpensive. People like to read, so now they can read more. They binge on shows and things, which probably isn't very productive. But it's another way that people see, I guess, things that occupy their time, and they deem it to be pleasurable.
The retirement spy is going to go knee deep into some travel things that I think are unique. I won't give away the future, but beyond going to the beach or to the mountains, there's so many wonderful places to see around the world beyond what we see as obvious to Europe and other things like this. I'm thinking one of our friends had mentioned something called the Great Loop, and we'll bring in the Great Loop a little bit later that I'd never even heard of before, which is a circumnavigation of the Great Lakes, the Mississippi River in a circuitous fashion that connects. I had never heard of that until
Now,
one of our
yeah,
friends brought it up, and I was like, the Great Loop, why have I never heard of this? Because I'm a boater. I love that.
I'm
What
writing
did,
that one down. I got to remember that.
Wait,
Go ahead.
stay tuned to podcast episode probably 76 by the time I get to that. But that's one of the things we want to explore here. And they come from the community we're building of people saying, hey, you need to pay attention to this. You've been around so many people, as I say, from the private jets to just flying first class to flying regular class. Think of some of the things that you think are unique as far as travel destination that you're like, wow, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. I think I'd like to do that. And it could be a safari to being on the Amalfi Coast.
I mean, it's fun to hear about clients' travels because some of them, there's many places that I haven't been, and cool places like Iceland and, lots of places in South America. I just talked to one client last week that did a around the world, I guess it was 2-month trip, flying private, not just themselves. Though I don't know what size airplane it was, but there were about 30 people that did it. So they were traveling with other people, none of which they knew. It was $250,000 a person. So they spent $500,000. It didn't sound that bad to
That's
me.
the way.
Yeah.
60 days private.
I think it was 60. It might have been a little bit less, but just a fabulous, fabulous experience. And these clients, they're obviously pretty wealthy, but they weren't exorbitantly wealthy. They really made an investment in this, and it was something that was on I don't even like the term bucket list, but it was on their list, and they crossed it off. And that's it was probably for them. It was certainly a once in a lifetime.
It's love to hear those adventures. We talked about the Great Loop and other places like this, and I always hear the basic things, which is let's go to Europe, let's do this. One of the topics that I'll explore that'll be on your podcast recently is something called an immersion vacation. It's not just a vacation; it's somebody who really wants to embody the culture of where they want to go. Example is somebody who's saying they did a 6-month immersion vacation in Ireland because of their Irish heritage. So they're spending 30 days in Dublin visiting the McClatchy family, and then they're going to go down and visit another part of their genetic chain, but they're doing this for 6 months. Another group I ran into said they really want to immerse themselves into Santa Fe. They're huge George O'Keeffe fans, and that's George O'Keeffe's territory and her artwork, but they want to be in Santa Fe for 30 days. And I thought that was just a really unique experience
That's
to say
cool.
beyond the vacation, I want to go spend enough time somewhere so I'm really into wherever I'm going, as opposed to just kind of
Yeah,
visiting for a week or so, which I
yeah,
think is really unique.
I think that's cool. And if you're not enjoying it, you cut it off early.
You've got your VRBO or your Airbnb or whatever
Yeah,
for a
I'm
month. And
sure. Yeah,
one thing I thought was fun, a friend of mine rented a villa in Tuscany for a month. And the first week was just he and his wife. Second week was his family. Third week was her family. And then the last week, they brought a bunch of friends over. But 5-bedroom, 5-bath villa. And every day, Mama Mia would come out. They'd go down to the market, get the fresh prosciutto, get the fresh basil, whatever it was in the market. And they would cook the big meal in the middle of the day with Mama Mia. And then it was a huge 2 o'clock lunch, a siesta. And then you had tons of leftover for dinner. And they did this every day. Clearly foodies, but what a great experience talking about an
yeah,
immersion in
yeah.
Tuscany.
Terrific.
Let's go back to something that's important to me and to our listeners is talking about identity. A friend of mine sold his company and I asked him what his new business card should read, and he said unemployed. I thought that was kind of funny. But another
Yeah.
kept his former title as CEO, but now he calls it Chief Entertainment Officer because he loves entertaining at his home and at his lake house. Have other people that you've talked to, clients, dealt with this sense of lack of an identity or needing for a title as they head into retirement, and how do they deal with it? Have you had those discussions?
Yeah, certainly. And I would say, even for personally for me, I think that is an issue. My identity, my name's on the door at this company, and I've been doing it for 35 plus years. So therefore, leaving it cold turkey would be difficult for me. And I think I can, fade away gracefully or even purposefully over a number of years and, probably still have some identity here just because I think, people want that for no other reason. My name's on the door. But yeah, I think that there is a lot of that if you really had on either a job that you really loved, whether it's corporate America or obviously if you're an owner or a co-owner of a business, letting go of that is difficult. And sometimes um and you and I both I have clients and you have friends that sell their business, and sometimes they sell it to private equity and they still have an interest, and then the second time around they sell the rest of it, and then you're kind of forced out. Oftentimes those are the type of people that have a problem with the identity thing, and they're between a rock and a hard place because they don't control the business anymore, their coworkers don't control it, it's somebody else that oftentimes isn't doing it the way that they would. And so that is, that's tough. So I would caution people that really want a runway and want to be involved in their business or their job to be patient about retirement and kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth because there are other people and lots of them too that are just afraid to do it, as you mentioned earlier. And those people just need to pull the trigger, and generally they're going to be just fine. But the thing with that, with having an identity with work, is a real thing, and something that people really need to think about how to handle. And there's no
Question.
perfect way to do it.
And you mentioned something I think that's important along that subject. Your name's on the door.
Right.
So the identity will be there long after you're going to retire. If you founded the ABC company and private equity took it over, unless your name is ABC, everything kind of goes away, right? And
Right.
I've even heard stories, prominent stories of people who, after they sold out to private equity, were so incensed by what happened to the company, they raised money and bought the company back. and
Right.
fired everybody who was there to say, "Okay, you're all out of here. I'm going to do it this my way." And these are great soap operas that should go into Netflix somewhere, but a way to do it. Question. We were talking about 3 or 4, when you're filling a 40-hour void of a work week, you now have the ability, you're not going to fill it one 40-hour event. You're going to fill it with 3, 4, 5 things. You said it very well. Health is such a big part of it. And I would easily say that if we had 40 hours to fill in a week, a fourth of that could easily be health. You want to work out every day. You can make it social. There's so much to be done. Give me, from your perspective or what you hear from your clients, the 3 to 4 bucket items that are there to fill your day.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly one. I think the thing that we haven't talked about, which I think is super cool, is people after they retire spend much more time with friends and family. And the opportunity to do that can't be overstated. The You've had friends who become great friends at retirement. I think you have acquaintances that become friends, and to me, and I know you have a lot of friends too. It's kind of the name of the game. The amount of wealth that you have is trumped by the relationships you have with friends and family, and the ability and the time to devote to them in retirement can be very, very significant and obviously meaningful. The other thing that I love to do, I love to read, and having the time to read the Wall Street Journal and work on a book is very, very welcome. I enjoy that. So if you say health, friends and family, reading, and I'll have to play golf, so I'm spending a little bit more time on the golf course.
Friends and family, I would say, is probably 50% of the time. And I say that depending on the size of your family and what you're doing, you can spend every waking hour with your family if you have a lot of kids and grandkids. But the friends that we have, and I say, how do you fill 40 hours? If I've got 20 hours to fill, I've got one golf group over here that's 5 hours, another golf group over there that's 5 hours, a pickle group over there that's 5 hours. I got my cigar group, which is a couple hours. I've got my 2 poker groups. You can easily see that the people that are important in your life, the friends and family, will take up little blocks of your time,
Yeah,
that it's more meaningful than ever, because when we were working so hard, we couldn't always make these things. We couldn't play golf. We couldn't
right.
take off. We couldn't do the trips that we do with our friends now. So it just makes all the difference in the world. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think especially for men, I read a statistic somewhere that women, I think, have it figured out a little bit better when they hit empty nest. Even working moms, when they hit empty nest with the kids, found a way to fill the void of the kids being out of the house. In an old misogynistic way, when men are just working, doing what they're doing, the women have got their mahjong groups, their tennis groups. They've filled these
Right.
voids a lot earlier than men do. And when men
Generally,
retire, they're like, "Hey, honey, let's go out to lunch on Thursday." And the wives are like, "Hey, cowboy, I have mahjong's on Thursday, tennis is on Tuesday. Get in line up." They've already planned their life out better than we have, but they did it earlier. So there's a lot to be learned there.
for sure.
Advice. Let's just say you're 3 to 5 years away from full retirement, or your advice to people who are that way, and money's not the issue. What recommendations beyond just the health and everything else would you give to help plan for that eventual exit?
Yeah. One of the things that I recommend and we talk about with folks is take a vacation at home with
Staycation.
nothing particular on the calendar and see how that goes. And more times than not, it'll go pretty well. It'll also give you a lot of, be able to give you more thoughtfulness to what it might be like. And people find themselves making lists of things that they want to do during that week. And then, doing all the other stuff that we talked about during that week, whether it's golf or pickle or health or reading. And so if you do that, I think you most likely will have less hesitancy going into either a big slowdown professionally or a complete stop.
I think that's brilliant. And the key here is being at home, the staycation. If you're on a vacation, you're busy, you're playing, you're doing whatever it is, and taking, as an example, a week off from work, but staying at home is the real world. This is what it would be like in retirement. You're not necessarily going on vacation every week in retirement. You're not going to work every week in retirement. And so you're left with your thoughts at home. And so this is a great way to think about that void and what it's going to be like. I think that's brilliant. I mean, it really is. And a great way to think about it. Andy, thank you so much for your time. The Retirement Spy and all of our listeners listen to you, and thank you so much. Homrich and Berg is such a great place for anybody who's looking for what we don't offer, which is financial advice. It's a great place for you to reach out in case you want to take your game to a new level. Andy, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet, Duncan. I enjoyed it. Good luck.